Vamos dar início ao painel agora, licenciamento profissional nos Estados Unidos. Vamos chamar o senhor Gustavo Ribeiro. Gustavo, que é arquiteto e urbanista, e também vai fazer esse papel de mediador aqui. Assim, Gustavo, por favor, fique à vontade, senta-se no melhor lugar. O senhor Michael Amestor, ele é CEO da Anchorage, é isso, Michael? Seja muito bem-vindo. Rishon Seaborn, também. Muito obrigada. Maurice Brown.
Good morning. I will be presenting in English, but I will speak slowly so the translation will work for everyone today. My name is Michael Armstrong, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, NCARB, and that is the United States organization that facilitates licensure across the 55 U.S. jurisdictions and creates a pathway for international candidates to become licensed in the U.S. So today we are going to talk primarily about the ways in which individuals from other countries can pursue a U.S. license to practice architecture. Just as a request for all of you, NCARB does a lot of outreach presentations, and we change our information frequently. So we ask that you not record this session. If you need to take a picture or certainly ask questions, that's fine. But we ask that you not record this session because it will become outdated and the information may not be accurate even within a few weeks. So a little bit more about myself. I am the Chief Executive Officer. NCARB is a non-governmental organization. We are based in Washington, D.C., and we work with the 50 U.S. states and the other 5 U.S. jurisdictions that also have licensing authority. In the United States, licensure is awarded at the state and jurisdictional level, not at the national level. So NCARB advises these different licensing jurisdictions on a standard approach to licensure, an examination that everyone uses, an experience program that is required, and educational opportunities and options to qualify you for licensure. These programs are then offered and adopted by our 55 U.S. jurisdictions. You might be curious why 55 when we only have 50 states. That's because we also have licensing separately in the District of Columbia, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Northern Mariana Islands. So those 5 jurisdictions, in addition to the 50 U.S. states, all legally have the authority to offer a license. So we want to explore today how NCARB can work with you if you're interested in becoming a U.S. architect. And today, as part of our presentation, we have 3 speakers. Maurice Brown, who is my colleague at NCARB, and he is our Vice President in our Council Relations Department. Rishon Seaborn, who also is an NCARB staff person, who is a manager in our Council Relations Department. And then Gustavo Ribeiro, who is a Brazilian architect who just recently received a license in the United States. And he will tell you about his personal story and how his path resulted in a license. And I believe he's going to present in Portuguese today to help most of the audience immediately comprehend what we're presenting today. So at this time, just one more slide to explain that, again, NCARB works with the 55 U.S. jurisdictions. We provide guidance in terms of model laws and regulations, as well as programs on how to get a license. In the United States, you cannot call yourself an architect unless you have a license. It is illegal to call yourself an architect unless you have a license. And then our other major program is after you get a license, we have something called the NCARB certificate, which allows you to have mobility across U.S. jurisdictional boundaries. And increasingly, we have agreements with other countries. So it is also a mobility passport after you get your license. So at this time, I'm going to ask my colleague, Maurice Brown, to continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Maurice Brown. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Council Relations, and I'm happy to be with you today. Before we dive into the different pathways to licensure in the US, I wanted to see by a raise of hands how many people here are currently pursuing licensure in the US. Okay, 1. That's great. 2. Perfect. 3. Excellent. Good. So hopefully a lot of what we explain today will be valuable to the rest of you. Oops. So like Mike had said, NCARB is a nonprofit organization that has 55 licensing board members who actually award the license at the state level. Through NCARB, those 55 boards help develop our national uniform standards for licensure. But what's very important to remember is that the individual state issues the license. NCARB helps facilitate that process. And essentially, each of those 55 licensing boards will require some combination of education, experience, and examination in order to evaluate a candidate. Also, while we have 55 members, we help support over 120,000 customers, both within the US as well as internationally. You may be wondering why get a license, especially in the US. And it's a career move that could help for a lot of reasons. It brings respect and recognition, but it also signals trust to prospective clients as well as your peers in the field. NCARB doesn't operate within the architecture profession alone. There are several other organizations who also help support candidates and licensees in the field. So you may be familiar with the American Institute for Architects, or AIA. There's also the National Organization for Minority Architects, or NOMA. There is the Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture, or ACSA, which is concerned with the quality of architecture programs in universities in the United States. There's also the National Architectural Accrediting Board, or NAB, which you may have heard of. They establish the criteria and conditions for accrediting architecture programs in the United States. And finally, there's also the American Institute for Architecture Students, or AIAS, which is the largest architecture student professional society. Mike mentioned briefly about a post-licensure credential called the NCARB certificate. Once an individual has received a license at the state level, they may be eligible through one of our pathways to obtain the NCARB certificate. Think of that certificate as a passport to help ease reciprocity between the states. And there are multiple ways of satisfying those requirements. The most typical path includes earning a degree from one of those NAB accredited universities, completing our architectural experience program, which is a prescribed experience program intended to help help demonstrate your experience in a variety of tasks and areas to demonstrate your competency to practice architecture safely. A successful completion of our architect registration exam, which is a 6-part examination to test your knowledge and your competency in certain areas within architecture practice. Providing proof of successfully earning the license in a state. And then finally having that certificate with us. There are alternative ways of satisfying this path. For example, if you haven't had the opportunity to go to an accredited university and you have a 4-year degree in architecture-related coursework, you've completed our experience program and successfully passed our exam. Through this path, you'll also have to demonstrate twice as much of the experience. So you will have to complete that experience program twice. You'll also have to provide proof that you have a license in one of the states. And currently, you have to document 3 years of experience. Although, based off of a recent vote of our membership, as of January next year, individuals through this path will no longer have to document that additional 3 years of experience. So there's some individuals who might not fit in those 2 previous categories, and they may not have an architecture-related degree. They may have an associate's degree or what we call a 2-year degree program. They may not have a college degree at all. So individuals in this path will have to complete a portfolio, which would help showcase their work in the architecture profession so as to demonstrate that they have the competency to practice safely. They would have to complete our prescribed experience program, the AXP, and successfully pass our examination, the ARE. Once they've been able to earn the license at a state that accepts this pathway, they would then be able to earn the NCARB certificate. This path currently also requires 3 years of documented experience, but as of next January, that will no longer be a requirement. So what might be a little more interesting to this crowd are individuals who have earned an architecture degree outside of the US. In that case, they would have to provide a transcript and have that evaluated, a Educational Evaluation Services for Architect, or ESA evaluation, which is conducted by NAB, the accrediting body in the United States. And essentially what they do is look at that transcript from your university in that coursework to see if it's substantially equivalent to the education standard that's used by the NAB. There may be some gaps that they identify that you would potentially have to make up with coursework, but it at least gives you an approximation of where your current education compares. In addition to that evaluation, an individual would have to complete our experience program, successfully pass our examination, and then be able to apply for a license at a state that accepts individuals through that pathway. There are some individuals who are currently licensed in their home country and would want to pursue licensure within the United States, and there is a somewhat similar pathway for them as well. They would provide a transcript to NCARB to help satisfy the education requirement, they would need to complete our experience program and successfully pass our exam. Again, there's a website that we have that indicates which of our states accept which of our programs or paths. And so individuals in this circumstance would need to make sure that they could apply to a state that would accept individuals through this way. But the benefit is once you've substantiated that with the first state and earned the NCARB certificate, you will then be able to have more expedited reciprocity to other states within the United States. There are a lot of resources on our website, and I know it can be a little overwhelming. So I would recommend looking at this QR code for the International Architect Path to Certification Manual, which will include the details for all of the pathways I explained, as well as supplemental resources to support candidates throughout this process. One of the things that I think Rishon and I are probably going to reiterate a couple times is to encourage anyone who's interested to reach out to our customer relations staff, whether by email or phone. They have specialists who are trained and knowledgeable in each of these different paths, and they're eager to help individuals who are interested in pursuing them.
And it works. Can tell you that.
Appreciate the testimony. So in addition to those pathways, we do have a few country-to-country mutual recognition agreements. So we currently offer agreements with Australia and New Zealand, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Through these agreements, individuals who are licensed in one of those member countries have an expedited path to licensure in the other country. Through comparative analysis of our respective licensure requirements, NCARB and our counterparts at these other countries have determined they're substantially equivalent and that an individual licensed in one of those nations could practice safely in another. So we've provided a gateway, so to speak, between them. On the screen, you'll see a hyperlink to our what we call our licensing requirements tool. This is an interactive site which will provide you with the information about our state's requirements for an initial license or a first license there, a reciprocal license, or your second license in another state, as well as practice requirements around continuing education or license renewal. So I highly encourage you to visit that website to just get a better idea of what's required in a state that you might be interested in pursuing licensure. And this is just a map, an image displaying for the internationally educated path and the international architect paths, which states currently accept those candidates in the blue. So it's quite a bit, but I strongly encourage you to go to those websites. When in doubt, if you have a question or you're a little confused, reach out to our customer relations staff and we'll share that contact information at the end of this presentation. So how do you get started? You have all this information we went through, but where do you go first? Well, if you're very serious and excited about applying for a license in the United States, your first step is going to be establishing your NCARB record. That'll be a place where you'll be able to track your progress, upload transcripts, chart your experience. When you begin testing the exam, you'll be able to go through that portal to gain access to the exam, get your eligibilities. So we highly recommend, if you're very interested, go to our webpage. You'll see a little sign that says login and select that to establish your record. And that'll get you started. It's The initial application fee is $103 US, and then there's an annual renewal fee. But what's helpful about that record is that you're able to put everything you need throughout your journey to licensure in the US in that portal, in that record. So you won't have to chase it down or submit it elsewhere. Okay. So we mentioned earlier that most of the 55 US licensing boards require an architect to hold a degree. All of them except the education from a NAB accredited program, some require it. And again, this is why it's important to go to that licensing requirements tool to make sure that you confirm what that state requires. The NAB evaluates the architecture programs in the United States to ensure that the graduates have the technical and critical thinking skills necessary to practice successfully. There's an important distinction here. The NAB accreditation of the architecture program is different than the accreditation for the university. I would also note there are 18 of our licensing jurisdictions that have a way to supplement that NAB degree or the NAB education through experience. They differ greatly, and that's one of our largest initiatives, is to try to come up with a more uniform approach to that. But I would encourage anyone who's interested in pursuing licensure to visit that licensing requirements tool, to find those states, to get a better idea of what that requirement looks like. We mentioned that for, say, the internationally educated architect path to our certificate, that it might require that education evaluation services for an architect or an ESA. There are some countries that are signatories to a Canterbury Accord, which allows their licensees a discounted ESA evaluation. So I believe that includes individuals from Mexico, Canada, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan, Korea, China, and South Africa. There's further information about that on our website, but I think if you are going to pursue our international path to the certificate and you are educated in one of those countries, I would look into making sure if you could take advantage of this ESA evaluation discount. Okay. So with that, my colleague Rishon is going to go into our architectural experience program and the architect registration examination with a little more depth. Thank you.
Bom dia. Thank you, Maurice, for that overview. One thing I just wanted to also add to that is we know that licensure looks really different depending on which country you're practicing in. So oftentimes you can call yourself an architect after you graduate college. So if that is the case, which I do believe there's some nuances, but I think that is applicable to Brazil, then you could apply for the international architect path. In some countries, just because you finish college doesn't mean that you automatically can call yourself an architect. And so if that's the case, then I would encourage you to look at those ESA requirements for the education, internationally educated route. So just wanted to clarify that. So today I'm going to speak a little bit about our experience, so the second E that Maurice talked about. And for the sake of time, I'll do a high-level overview so we can have Gustavo also share his experience. So as Maurice mentioned, the Experience AXP program that we have is essentially a framework that is supposed to help candidates guide you through your professional experience. And so we have that broken down into 6 experience areas. So we have practice management, project management, program and analysis, project design, planning design, project development and documentation, and construction and evaluation. So in order to complete your experience, you would have needed to documented a total of 3,740 hours, which sounds like a lot. And I think a question oftentimes people ask is, well, how many years is that, right? But that's hard math to do, right? Because your experience can look really different. And the purpose of this is that hopefully each experience area you will have touched at some point in your career. So maybe you're getting a lot of practice management while you're hypothetically in school, or you're just starting out at a firm, but maybe you'll get more exposure to construction and evaluation later on down the line. So I'm gonna go through a lot of information today, but we do have what we call our AXP guidelines, and this is also on our website, and all the things that I'm mentioning here today will be there as well. So from the 6 experience areas that we just saw, each of them, well, in total, they will be written as 96 tasks. So those tasks are divided by each of the experience areas, and they're serving as more of like a checklist to help guide you through each area of what you should be gaining experience and competency in. We recently have undergone an initiative where we understand that we have a lot of rigor in the profession, but also trying to make things more clear and easier to follow of what exactly is needed to be achieved in each area. So the 96 tasks that I just mentioned are now being, I guess they were rewritten to be to fit into 16 different competencies. Now that means that the 96 tasks are still there in a way. They just are, I was going to say boiled down, but they are modified to fit under the 16 competencies. So essentially it is the same requirements and criteria that's being asked to follow in the framework. It just looks a little bit differently. And some of these, so this change is not yet, well, the competency standard is out, but however, the new 16 reimagining will be officially public as of November 18th. So as you're gaining experience, we have broken it down into basically two experience settings. So we refer to them as setting A and setting O. I'd like to think as setting A as this is experience that you will be earning in an architecture firm. And the key to this is as you're documenting, and I'll get to this in a moment, but as you're documenting your experience, you will need to have an AXP supervisor signing off on it. So this is someone who is validating that, yes, indeed, I have overseen the work of you and I can vouch that this is correct. But also for your AXP supervisor for setting A, your supervisor has to be licensed either in the US or Canada. And so that is... That's exciting, isn't it? Okay. Took me out of the moment for a second. Love that. So your AXP supervisor must be licensed in either the US or Canada. For setting O, this is the experience that you're earning outside of an architecture firm. So technically you could be earning this experience whether you're still in school or if you're even unemployed. And also the supervisor or mentor that's signing off in your setting O criteria, they don't necessarily have to be a licensed architect. So for setting O, they can be an engineer or a landscape architect, but as long as it is still related to architecture by nature. Also a caveat too for this is a lot of folks, especially if they're pursuing our international architect path, that means that you do have experience in whichever country that you're licensed in, and that experience can still be captured, and most likely, oftentimes we see that it can satisfy at least all of setting O. For the sake of time, I will not read all of these, but these are some other examples of what setting O experience can be captured. And I think the one thing I'll highlight there is, for an example, a site visit with a mentor. So that doesn't mean that you're just kind of driving to the site visit, right? But it does mean that maybe you're walking through the site, you're asking questions, they're kind of giving you some updates about the plans or et cetera. So that's a good example of what some maybe outside of the architecture firm experience looks like. So I mentioned supervisor. Again, this is someone who will be directly overseeing your work and who will be able to vouch for the experience that you're documenting, but oftentimes also will be using the word mentor. And mentor, like for an example, right, for the site visit, for the setting O experience, they can vouch for that too, but we do like to also encourage that you find someone and connect with someone who is an architect mentor to you or has been through the experience, or even if they haven't been through the process, someone who is your cheerleader and can support you in this journey, and even someone that maybe they don't know where to start, but they know that they're going to be right in your corners and helping you find the resources and connecting you to the people that you need to be in contact with. And so recently, NCARB has created supervisor resources just because they're your supervisor. Maybe they're not up to date on all of the updates and program requirements that we have, and that's okay, right? So we do have some training material for your supervisors that you can send them. They're able to read it themselves. And again, if they do have any specific questions, we do have a whole department and a team of subject matter experts who can guide them through any of those specific details that they might not be as clear on. So one thing that I will say is if you are currently gaining experience, we do encourage you to report that experience on time and often. I know that life is busy and it gets in the way, and what you think you will do a week from now will turn into 5 months, right? And it's also really hard to remember all that you're doing all the time. So the one caveat with this is that your experience does have a reporting requirement. So currently, I'm saying that because we have some changes coming down the pipeline, but currently the reporting experience, the reporting requirement is that if you are earning experience, you must submit that experience within 8 months to receive 100% of the credit. Anything that you report after 8 months will be deducted and you will receive 50% of that credit. And you can backlog that up to 5 years, past 5 years of experience. So that's currently what our reporting requirement is. Also with the changes that we just had from our board meeting in June, as of November 18th, the reporting requirement is changing. So you can submit the experience up to 1 year to receive 100% credit. And if you're documenting any experience that's older than 1 year, you can receive 75% of that credit, and the 5-year cap is removed. So this is, I'd say, really exciting and a huge win. I think, we are humans, but also that doesn't mean that experience is invalid. I will say that if you are pursuing our International Architect program, the experience reporting requirement actually does not apply to folks who have been made eligible. So that means that you can document experience as far back as you might have. Again, that's a very specific caveat for the International Architect program. And so this is just an image of what when you are logging your hours look like. Some people like to do it hourly, some people like to do it monthly, whatever you have. But as you are logging your hours, you will see the kind of completion bar of each experience area. And you can document this through our NCARB record that Maurice talked about right before I started. Again, all of this information is in our AXP guidelines, and so feel free to look this up, take a picture of this for later if you like. So yes. Oh, hold on. Okay. Oh, I'm giving you a preview unintentionally. Okay, there you go. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so as I wrap up, before I pass this to Gustavo, I am going to talk about the last E that we mentioned, which is for our examination. And again, this is a multi-divisional exam that we administer, and you are required to pass all 6 divisions in order to become licensed here in the States. So hopefully this looks familiar, right? We just saw this in our 6 experience areas. And these divisions correlate with the experience areas. So the way that this was designed is that we hope that the experience that you're gaining in the real world can also be applicable to this examination. So it's not to trick you, it's not to fool you, right? But it is to hopefully make you a better architect and more competent, and especially as you apply your real world experience to other scenarios. The last thing I'll say about this slide is that instead of the number of hours that is required for the to gain experience, like we saw in AXP, the numbers here are listed to show you the length of each exam. So just because there are 6 exams, they are all different lengths. So something to note is that there is no order to take these in. So if you feel that you are ready to start with construction and evaluation, go for it. Like, you're able to do that. There is no set order. So typically the ARE structure for each exam will start off with some introductory questions, and just to make sure that you're familiar with the format and the platform. We'll get into the modality of testing in a second. And then the different types of questions that we have are more so multiple choice, and another series of click all that apply. And then lastly, we do like to have case studies, which are bringing that real world application, but through an exam format. Lastly, we do have some question types that we like to call hotspots, and basically those are just interactive. So maybe a test question might prompt you to click something to indicate what you're referring to or something like that. So we do have an ARE candidate agreement, and this is for the sake of confidentiality and exam security, which is something that's very important to NCARB, but also we see this trend in many other fields that require examination for practice. And so right as you're beginning to take the test, this is just making sure that you understand and you are compliant, that what you see on the exam is for you to know and you to know only. And so this means that you're not going to be discussing with a colleague or telling your parents or your significant other about what you saw in the exam. And that's just for the sake of security and, again, confidentiality. And this also even includes, we'll find that there are oftentimes study groups, study groups are fine and that's great. But again, you can study together, but not necessarily discussing the answers and after you take the exam together. So the testing modality. So I'll start with in-person testing centers, which may or may not be as applicable, but that's okay. So we have a partnership with a test provider called PSI, and they should physically have at least one location in all of the 55 jurisdictions. And so what you can do on our website, but also the PSI website, is to you can search by zip code, or you can search by state or your actual town or county, and it should provide you a list of all of the testing centers in that area. Just as some helpful tips and tricks, we do advise that folks try to get there 30 minutes early just to A, give yourself some breathing room, but also B, the reality is that some of the locations are in, they're not necessarily in rural areas, so they might be in the city, right? So you might need time to park and kind of calm down and defrazzle. And also, sometimes it just, life happens. And so when you finally arrive at the testing site, they will ask for personal ID. The one thing I'll mention about this is to make sure that your ID is, the name on your ID matches the name that's on the exam. So, if you have a nickname or something that's not legally documented, make sure that you're consistently writing out the name the same way. And then just like any type of security screening, they will just make sure, the folks at the testing site will make sure that you don't have anything on you or anything that could be, indication of something that's not honest and true to help you test with the exam. I will say with that if you know that you need a snack in between or anything like that, that's okay. You'll most likely have a little storage bag or a locker. So make sure that you're also, there it is, love it. Just make sure that you're also thinking about what you need to continue the exam strong. So for the online testing, this I feel like might be a little bit more applicable, but PSI also allows you to take the exam online from wherever you are in the world, which is really exciting. There are some nuances there. So because you're not going to be in a testing center, we do have an online proctor that will be monitoring virtually monitoring you as you take the exam to make sure that you are, not getting any inside help or anything like that. We do encourage folks to schedule a test run when you are scheduling this exam. And this is because there are some specific requirements here that are listed, but you do have to make sure that you are connected to high speed and stable internet, making sure that you are taking this in a private room, so you can't take it in a library or a communal shared space or anything like that, and making sure that your external webcam meets the requirements with autofocus. And the autofocus is also to make sure that they can see you and that you can see that you can see the material, in addition to making sure that the resolution on your monitors is clear, that you can also read the material easily. So for exam eligibility, in most cases, you can unlock or open your exam eligibility through your NCARB record. Again, we do encourage you just to make sure that you are checking the licensing requirements tool, because specific jurisdictions might have an extra detail about when or you can test or how early in your career you can do that. Again, if you are pursuing or interested in pursuing the International Architect Program, your eligibility is actually unlocked once you become eligible for the program and you pay the certification fee. So it's a little bit different, but again, this is all through your NCARB record. Okay, almost done here. So for the key examination policies, we talk about score validity. So currently, all of the exam material that we've talked about today is referring to the version of ARE 5.0. So for the sake of score validity, a division score of pass remains valid while the version of the exam is being delivered and the immediately following version. So what does that mean? So if you are passing an exam, or say that you pass an exam for ARE 4.0, because ARE 5.0 is still being administered, your pass still remains valid. I also will bring up the point that how we score the exam is pass-fail. So that's why I'm saying pass instead of a certain percentage. Retesting, I feel that sometimes people don't like to talk about failing, and sometimes maybe you won't successfully pass an exam the first time around. And honestly, that's okay, right? There's many reasons why that happens and many different variables, but we do want to make sure that folks are still feeling encouraged to pursue and try again, and maybe you know more now, or maybe you'll study differently right this time around. So if that's the case, if you do fail an exam, you must wait 60 days before retesting. And this is just for the sake of, there's only so many questions that we have in our item banks, right? And then the caveat to that is you can test up to 3 times with the same division per year. And I already talked about the pass-fail. So for scheduling, each division costs 257 USD to test. If you do find yourself in a situation where you need to reschedule, we try to encourage folks to, if you're testing in person, to at least cancel within 48 hours. If it's online, the time window is 24 hours, and this is from the start time of your exam. So the first time, if you need to reschedule, it's free. The second time, if it happens, 52 USD, and then the third time, and if there's more, then 103 USD. And then if you do need to cancel, you will receive a seat credit, but also make sure that you're using that within a 1-year duration. So one thing I will note that I think this was maybe 2.5 years ago, we did launch an ESL accommodation. So this is if English is your second language. And this allows, and if you are going to use this, you have to apply for the accommodation before you schedule your exam. And so this allows test takers to have 20% of additional time of that exam. So earlier I highlighted that each exam has a different test length, so that's 20% of that specific exam's test length. If you are in person, you are allowed to have a word-for-word, strictly just word-for-word translation dictionary. If you are testing online, unfortunately, that is not available as an option. Okay, this part I will skip a little bit because I know Gustavo is going to talk about this, but we do have a wealth of free practice exams online. So you can access this through your NCARB record. And if you do not have an NCARB record, there is a PDF version on our website as well. So this is a robust, and there are practice exams for each division. Again, we have a wealth of ARE candidate resources. Some things here, we have a YouTube channel of support, examination support series. We have an ARE community, and this is an online group of other folks who are studying for the exam. And so they're kind of in the same boat, and they're able to ask questions. And we do have NCARB staff members who also are involved in the community, so they can answer, but also give you the correct answer and highlight where you can find that in our ARE guidelines. Again, this is some supervisor resources, the same resources that I highlighted in the AXP section. This is also similar to that as well. And then lastly, I know that we talked about a lot of resources and we've thrown out some dollar amounts, which is all helpful to know. But if you are working at a firm, I would encourage you to ask maybe your supervisor or maybe a colleague if they have any test prep materials or anything like that. We are seeing kind of some trends that maybe firms have some booklets in their library, which is really helpful. And also, I'm not sure about Brazilian firms, but we are starting to see a slow wave of architecture firms reimbursing their staff or interns for every past exam, a division of their exam. So it's worth asking. If it's not right now, I would encourage you to keep asking. Again, this is all in the ARE guidelines on our NCARB website. And I think this is where I end here, but I'll let Gustavo talk about his experience and as you go. So take a picture of our contact information. Thank you.
Vai trocar a apresentação, né? Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Maurice. Thank you, Rishon. And also thank you for understanding and agreeing that deliver this in Portuguese. I think it's going to be better that we don't lose anything in the translation. So thank you. Então vou fazer em português, pessoal. Combinei com eles assim. Apesar da minha apresentação estar tá, em inglês. Eu combinei agora de última hora, porque o tempo está curto para mim. Talvez seja melhor até fazer dinamicamente. Se alguém quiser fazer uma pergunta, fique à vontade para me interromper aqui, que não sei se vai ter tempo para perguntas no final. Um pouco sobre mim, eu tenho 30 anos de experiência, fundei um escritório no Brasil e outro nos Estados Unidos recentemente, e a minha trajetória de perseguir o licenciamento, ela começou algum tempo atrás, mas foi só recentemente que tomou corpo e eu consegui progredir e finalizar. A última etapa foram as provas, e a parte de experiência, como a Rishon disse aqui, ela pode ser descontada com a experiência passada no Brasil. Isso me ajudou muito, eu consegui aproximadamente 40%, 50% das horas, registrando as horas do meu trabalho no meu escritório brasileiro. Além do meu trabalho de arquiteto, eu tenho vários anos também servido ao EUA como um voluntário em posições, né, da diretoria do EUA International, que é normalmente o EUA que os brasileiros passam a fazer parte assim que se associam à instituição. Então, o caminho que eu persegui, naturalmente, é o caminho do estrangeiro, né, e eu tenho que fazer seguir os 3 S, né, que é educação, experiência e o exame. Eu vou falar só sobre o exame, as duas, porque principalmente o exame é uma coisa que é 100% dependente de você. As outras, a experiência, uma parte dela, pelo menos, vai depender de outro arquiteto, de outras oportunidades. Então, é difícil também, mas é atingível, mas ela não é 100% dependente de você, e educação é um dado, né? Você já fez o seu curso, então é uma coisa que é difícil você alterar o passado, o que você já fez o curso. Ainda há estudantes aqui, vocês vão se formar, né? Mas o seu título vai estar determinado assim que você se forme, né? Ao passo que o exame é uma coisa que você estuda, tenta fazer e passa, né? Então, o que são os exames? Eles tocaram aqui brevemente no que é isso, né? Mas são essas 5 divisões que é como se fosse uma divisão do trabalho real de um arquiteto nos Estados Unidos. A gente tem a Practice Management, é uma gestão do escritório, né? Você vai ser testado em saber como gerenciar um escritório, cuidar de horas, billable hours, como se calcula isso, como em um projeto você consegue determinar o que pode ser cobrado, o que deve ser cobrado, como você gerencia o pessoal do escritório. Então, toda a parte administrativa de um escritório, estratégica, inclusive, com business development, você tem que saber como lidar com isso, né? A seguinte é Project Management, que é a gestão do projeto, que é o gerenciamento do projeto. Nessa fase, você vai aprender a administrar o projeto, não é design ainda, né? Você está gerenciando a sua equipe, gerenciando os consultants, que são os projetistas complementares, e gerenciando as finanças do projeto específico. Então, esse gerenciamento de projeto é feito, é avaliado nessa sessão. E aí, a seguinte começa a entrar já na parte de design, né, que seriam os 3 blocos seguintes. A gente tem programa, né, fazer o programa de um cliente, ele chega para você e ele quer fazer um empreendimento, alguma escola, algo desse tipo. Você tem que saber como criar o programa, fazer as perguntas certas, analisar questões ambientais para determinar já uma implantação inicial. Então, é o pre-design. O pre-design da indústria, mais ou menos, estaria nessa fase, né? Depois vem Planning and Design, que, grosso modo, corresponde aqui no Brasil ao anteprojeto. É um projeto que você já começa a incorporar alguns projetistas complementares dentro do projeto, desenvolver um pouco mais. E o Project Development and Documentation é a parte de detalhamento e projeto executivo. E essa difere bastante, né? Eu vou fazer até uma outra palestra aqui sobre a prática profissional americana, e eu acho que, assim, primeiro, nessa estrutura geral, que já é um pouco diferente da nossa, mas na parte de documentação, que é o Construction Documents, que eles chamam, ela é estruturada de uma forma bem diferente que no Brasil, né? E o papel do arquiteto é diferente nesse aspecto. Então, esse bloco vai avaliar a sua capacidade de saber disso aí. E aí vem a Construction and Evaluation, que é a administração e gerenciamento da obra, né? O gerenciamento do contractor, que é o construtor da obra, e de todos os eventos que acontecem durante a construção. Então, o que você precisa saber, né? O NCARB, o que eles apresentaram aqui, gente, parece complicado, e né? Mas o NCARB ele faz um papel fantástico de mastigar tudo e deixar muito claro. Então, você, no site deles, quando você cria o registro e vai progredindo nas suas informações de experiência, de horas, de exames, né, é tudo muito claro, sabe? O procedimento é claro, eles te atendem muito bem. Toda dúvida que você tem, pergunta, ela é respondida, eles se esforçam para ajudar, sabe? As pessoas não têm essa visão positiva, talvez eu tenha uma visão mais positiva do que a média, mas, de fato, eu acho que é um serviço fantástico. Eu sempre elogiei e agradeci muito que eu pude navegar com muita facilidade nessa trajetória, nessa jornada aí, para obter minha licença com a ajuda do NCARB. Então, assim, todos né, você vê que são, assim, um conteúdo massivo, é profundo, é muita coisa que tem que saber, né? Então, todos esses, você pega cada um desses itens, ele é quebrado, né, em pequenos itens menores que você tem que saber especificamente cada uma desses aspectos desses itens, né? Então, para você conseguir lidar com tudo isso, eles apresentam também quais são os materiais que você precisa estudar. O NCARB já também mastiga isso para você. Atualmente são 16 livros que está no manual atual deles, né? Eles até pediram para não gravar, porque realmente, dinamicamente, muita coisa atualizada no NCARB. Quando eu comecei a fazer as provas, eram 35 livros, então já deu uma simplificada. E tem os livros principais e há um certo overlap, assim, alguns livros você usa para mais de alguma das fases, né? Então, esse seria a base, a literatura base para se obter o conhecimento para um exame, né? São os livros, os códigos, né? No caso é o IBC, que é um código modelo americano que serve de modelo para todos os outros códigos estaduais, né? Então, é um código de obras e um código de ocupação. Não é zoneamento, mas é um código de construção. E os contratos do EAA, que também são contratos padrão e determinam muito do gerenciamento e do design de arquitetura nos Estados Unidos, né, muito baseado no sistema, no ecossistema de contratos. Então, é importante, o NCARB vai avaliar se você sabe sobre os contratos ou não. Então, seguindo aqui. E, no final das contas, é uma provocação que eu fiz com o Rishon, I teased you about this. Eu realmente gostei de fazer os exames. É uma coisa assim que, frequentando o fórum do NCARB, as pessoas têm uma certa raiva dos exames, não gostam muito, é um desafio, eu entendo isso, mas eu vi isso como uma oportunidade de aprender, em primeiro lugar, né, e validar o que eu já conhecia como arquiteto, né, aprender uma cultura nova de construção, de gerenciamento de projeto, né, e, ao mesmo tempo, interagir com pessoas. O fórum que eles mencionaram aqui é uma fonte muito boa de conhecimento e de interação com as pessoas, para treinar, tanto para treinar com o exame, para expandir seu networking. E, obviamente, você tem que treinar, porque é um exame standardizado, é um exame padrão. Então, você tem que treinar para fazer prova, não é só o conhecimento puro. Tem estratégias de prova, como você aborda as questões. Então, existe essa parte que ela realmente não é uma coisa que você, a não ser que você vai fazer outros exames na vida, vai ser um benefício para você, além do próprio conhecimento, que eu acho que é o mais importante. Então, como é que eu abordei o meu processo de estudo, né? Eu mergulhei nos livros, estudei bastante, utilizei os simulados do NCARB, que são os Practice Exams, e eles são muito bons, são muito próximos da realidade. Frequentei o fórum do NCARB muito, trocando informação, extraindo informações de lá, e o YouTube com diversos vídeos para reforçar todas as informações. Eu criei um sistema de organizar essas ideias, né? Então, usando esses são os livros canônicos de isso vale para qualquer atividade profissional nos Estados Unidos. Você tem o Architect Handbook of Professional Practice, que assim ele é o que é a Bíblia de gestão de um escritório, né? Você tem o Architectural Graphical Design, que é uma Bíblia de projeto, né, de desenhos. Não sei se ainda existe aqui, mas na minha época existia o Neufer, que era um livro que a gente usava. Esse é o Neufer americano, certo? E tem o outro, que é uma versão mais simplificada desse, que é o Building Construction Illustrated, que é um outro autor. Ele não é do AIA, mas é um livro que resume um pouco mais, condensa, ele é mais gráfico, mais ilustrado do que o AGS. Certo? Tem alguns outros livros acessórios e os códigos e os contratos. Então, essa é basicamente a literatura. Então, isso é o que eu fiz. Eu usei o Notion para criar e copiar todos os itens do NCARB e mastigar e filtrar por importância, porque tem peso na prova, né? Alguns itens têm mais questões do que outros itens. Então, eu pude classificar o que seria mais relevante, mais importante. Esses 2 textos iniciais aqui são do próprio NCARB. Eu copiei e colei para poder reforçar na minha cabeça o que eles queriam entender, né? E aí eu criei conceitos-chave, que são uma lista de conceitos que seriam importantes eu aprender para cada um desses itens que eu precisava estudar. Então, esses conceitos-chave eu ia progredindo, né, eu ia rastreando a minha progressão nos estudos desses conceitos, e dentro de cada um desses, isso é um banco de dados, então isso é dinâmico, dentro de cada um desses eu coletava e fazia minhas próprias notas. Então, por exemplo, moisture thermal, proteção, né, do envelope de arquitetura. Então, os dados que eu pesquisava e estudava, eu ia colocando em cada um desses itens. E isso que me fez gostar, porque isso é um manual que eu vou levar para a vida profissional nos Estados Unidos. É uma coisa que eu tenho a referência para sempre e vou atualizando isso à medida que as coisas forem evoluindo, mudando, e eu for obtendo mais informações. Então, aí vídeos do YouTube, eu tiro um print da tela de resumo, né? E tudo isso você acaba obtendo também no fórum. As pessoas falam, determinada pessoa tem um vídeo muito bom, aí você vai lá e olha e copia. Então, a fartura de... Meu tempo acabou. A fartura de informações, ela é muito... ela está lá, é farta, né? O nível de informações é farto, né? E você consegue fazer isso, você consegue obter essas informações. E, assim, em resumo, é um caminho árduo, né, mas eu acho que ele é benéfico. Assim, eu tirei uma experiência positiva disso. Eu acho que o que eu obtive desse processo, apesar de ser difícil, estressante, é que eu estou mais bem preparado, conheço mais e vou carregar isso para sempre como uma coisa positiva. Então, é isso. Thank you, NCARB.